since 2008. She also, her primary role is also designing and managing estuarine and enhancement and restoration projects within Lake Worth Lagoon.
Thank you, Jen. All right, thank you everyone for coming. As Eric pointed out in his presentation, there are challenges and obstacles that we have to face when we're planning restoration projects, but those obstacles don't stop once we have the approval. They continue on during the construction and even sometimes afterwards. So what I'm going to focus on today is a project where we actually successfully managed muck sediments in the lagoon. Rob pointed out earlier that mucky is one of the biggest challenges we have in the lagoon and something we'll be facing for years to come. So I want to give you a brief overview of muck sediments, where they come from, what the effects are, and the distribution in the lagoon, and then follow up with the project, which again successfully managed those muck sediments. So muck in the Lake Worth Lagoon, this photo was taken in the central part of the lagoon, directly adjacent to the C51 canal, and you can see here, I guess I can't, the pointer here, you can kind of see a line here where may not be as clear on the projector, but there's a clear line where it's actually the discharge with the C51 coming to the right of the photo, coming out. And so that discharge is actually carrying, it's stormwater discharge coming from the uplands, so it's carrying in the water sediments, suspended sediments. Once those sediments make their way into the lagoon, they settle out on top of the sandy substrate as muck sediments. And that's kind of what it would look like. Same photo was in Eric's presentation, but it's very, they're fine-grained, very organic rich, and they're very greasy almost. I mean, it leaves a stain on your hands. So again, primarily from stormwater discharge, the photo there is the S155 structure, which is in the C51 canal. And again, they blanket the natural substrate, as I said, which then kind of prohibits, prohibits any real marine life growing, seagrass, oysters. And then lastly, probably the biggest problem, and this is a blow up of that area down here, but probably the biggest problem is that they're very easily resuspended because they're so fine. Any, tidal action, boat action, anything like that, even birds wading in very shallow water will create their own turbidity plume. And so that, obviously impacts water quality for the area. So in Lake Worth Lagoon, the majority of the muck sediments are distributed in the central part between Southern and Lake Worth, or Lake Ave. Most of it is, a good portion of it's greater than a foot thick, with the greatest being south of the C51 canal. You can kind of see that in the bottom here, and then again in the top. And so the orange designates where there's a thick muck sediments. And you'll see we're going to talk about Ibis Isle, which is this island right here. So just to go into a little detail about Ibis Isle, I'm showing you a photo from 1940, and you can see the C51 canal off to the left here with the plume, obviously with the discharge coming out, carrying those suspended sediments. And then fast forward 13 years to when Ibis Isle was developed into a residential island. So you have condominiums on the north half of the island and single-family homes in the south half of the island. So what's happened as the discharge is coming in, those muck sediments are coming with it, and they're falling behind the island. And you can see the island is built not exactly, parallel to the Intercoastal Waterway or even the island, Palm Beach Island itself, but at an angle. And so because of that and this Ibis Way, the road here, you'll see that there's very little opening there for the water to move through. So you have a lot of that muck sediment just piling up behind it. And just to kind of take you on the ground to really see what it looked like before we did any work out there, this is that Ibis Way photo that I pointed out earlier. So this is north of that bridge, looking north. And so you can see at low tide, all the muck sediments were exposed. We did have some natural oyster reefs out there, but again, it was anywhere from a foot to 7 feet thick of muck sediments. So here's the south side of the ridge, and again, same thing. We're at low tide, you're exposed with muck sediments. And if that's not good enough perspective, you can ask any of these people what it's truly like to be stuck in the muck sediments. You can see we're all still smiling. There were days that it was very difficult when we were relocating oysters, and we literally, this photo in particular, and these two, Mary, Danny, and Tony, they can all testify that you literally were stuck. And if you didn't have something to put your weight on to pull yourself out, or literally someone to help pull you out, and that's why we're all so dirty. obviously skating across the surface of it. I describe it kind of like quicksand, but a mud version, where it suctions you in, so there's no way to get out. So, God forbid you were out there by yourself, you'd be stuck until high tide. So thanks to all these people for helping making this happen. So some of our project goals, and I should say the project came to us actually from the town of Palm Beach. The residents actually went to the town complaining about the odors and just the unsightliness of the area. And so they came to us, and of course they wanted us to dredge, but that's not our mission in our department. So our thing is creating habitat. So our goal was obviously to create habitat, but how do we do so in such a way that we can contain the muck sediments, which would then hopefully improve water quality and provide, some more productive habitat for wildlife. So what we came up with after many alternatives was placing a sand cap on top of the muck sediments. And to do that, we had to bring in approximately 40,000 cubic yards of sand and then place it over the top. And to stabilize that cap, we brought in some lime rock and placed it around the perimeter of the project. So you can see here the green represents the mangrove areas, the yellow represents the cordgrass. We left a couple bare areas for bird foraging. And then the perimeter itself, which you see here in kind of gray, that's the lime rock, which would become oyster habitat. And part of the project, what I guess alluded to on the previous slide here, is that we did have some oysters kind of scattered over those muck sediments, and prior to any construction, we actually go in and relocate the oysters, which these photos are a result of that effort. So just to walk you through kind of, step by step of the construction, you might think that, bringing in a sand to make a cap and placing some rock, that should be fairly easy, right? Fairly straightforward. But obviously you've seen the conditions. And to top it off, you not only have the tide to deal with and you have the thick muck sediments, but you also have natural resources that already exist. You have the oyster that I showed you on the slide, the oyster reefs, as well as an existing mature mangrove fringe along the perimeter. And because of the shallow depths, we obviously couldn't bring in a barge, so we had to do all our construction by land. And so the first step was to create an opening through the existing mangrove fringe. Luckily, we were able to find a gap, so we didn't have to impact mangroves too much. And so we had to, through that gap, I think it was 25 feet wide, we had to bring in, this 40,000 cubic yards of sand. So what you see here is them building this temporary access to the lagoon. So in order to get all that sand out there, obviously we don't want these big dump trucks, coming out and driving on there. So the contractor brought his sand conveyor system, which he typically uses for beach renourishment projects or dune renourishment, and brought them out and was able to get the sand from the staging area where the trucks would dump it into the hopper and then transport it out to the project area. So this aerial perspective gives you a little bit better idea of what it looked like. So you have the staging area up here with the hopper where the dump trucks would pull in, dump their sand, and then it would be conveyed out here. And so this represents actually the what we call the temporary perimeter berm. And the idea with that is obviously to create a road where we can drive equipment, but also it served as a barrier to prevent turbidity. So you see the turbidity curtains, but during the entire time we did it, we never had a turbidity violation. You guys, Jen, you noted that, right? Right. Okay. Rob, wherever you are. All right. So, and one of the things is, the contractor was very adamant that he wanted to use filter fabric underneath the road, the building of the road, because he came out and obviously observed how fluid the muck was and how there was a potential that the muck would just be displaced. If you're placing sand on it, there's a chance that it would just push out on either side. So he was very adamant about the filter fabric. He gave him a hard time, but in the end, he was certainly right. That was the way to go. So they laid out, I think it was 30 or 40 feet wide filter fabric. And he was able to come up with this method where he created a cell, essentially. So he put sand around, built a berm around the edges of the filter fabric, which would, prevent it, hopefully from, in most cases, prevent it from seeping out on either side, and then he would fill on the inside. So again, that just kind of minimized the displacement. And then once he had that perimeter berm built, he started building some secondary access roads here that were perpendicular, just because the distance was so great that he wasn't able to reach the entire width with the excavator. But we found out muck waves are inevitable, so even when you follow this method that he came up with, again, the muck is just so fluid that it actually will build up in the center, kind of bubble up, and in a couple cases actually caused the filter fabric itself to burst. The seams just ripped at the seams. And so that became another problem. Okay, what do we do when we have, buildup of muck? What do we do when we have muck now in this area that's supposed to be sand? So sometimes we learn you just have to regroup and come up with, alternative out-of-the-box thinking. And again, they were very good at that. So here's an example of how that was used. So on the southern end, you can see this opening. This is the bridge that I was talking about. Not very wide at all. And so when he was creating the road at the very end, it actually caused this muck wave to displace out from underneath the turbidity curtain on either side of it. So what he had to do was come in, because we needed obviously to restore the conditions back to how they were, because that was outside of our project area. So he came in, scooped out the muck, created a temporary containment area here, and added a significant amount of sand to mix it. And then he then took that material and used it back in the building of the road. He kind of took his out-of-the-box thinking a step further. Because we were having a problem with using the excavator and causing that muck wave or the muck displacement, he created this machine called the sand shooter, as we've kind of termed it, where it's essentially like a snow blower or a pea gravel shooter, where the material is dumped in the back end, back here. There's a grate over it to prevent any kind of rocks or sticks or anything from getting in. And that material is then transported to the front of the machine on two conveyors. At the front, the conveyors converge onto this one arm, and that arm can be controlled to move left or right or up and down. And so it shoots out the sand a distance of about 70 feet. And it was important because the long stick excavator reached about 35 to 40 feet. So we were doubling the width that we were able to, or the distance that we were able to place sand. And in the end, it resulted in a more even layer of sand. We didn't have as much muck displacement, so in the end it actually resulted in a cost savings because there was less muck that we had to kind of move around. So again, here's another aerial photograph. So at this point they had finished kind of on the central portion, and there was a lot of, Eric talked earlier about a lot of muck moving, and so he moved it just kept moving muck from one side to another. Here's what the sediment cap looked like post-capping. You have your historic layer, your compressed muck in the middle, and then your sand cap. So again, here's two more photos of how it worked. Your lime rock was placed on the edge to stabilize it. They excavated the berm to the design elevation, and then that was pretty much the end of their work. So the last step, like Eric had said, was planting cordgrass and mangroves. We used volunteers to plant the mangroves and a contractor to plant the cordgrass. So with any project, obviously there has to be an evaluation to determine whether or not it was successful. So we looked at a few different parameters, and this is just going to be a few slides to just show you how the things have progressed. So the mangroves we planted 3 years ago now, many of them now have their own propagules. We have lots of recruited mangroves, all 3 species. We have survival and expansion of the cordgrass that was planted. Within 6 months of placement of the lime rock, we had oyster spat coming in. And one unintended benefit was we actually recruited seagrass. Completely unexpected, but in the areas that maintain water at low tide, even just an inch or two, we found Johnson seagrass and even shoalgrass in some areas. 4, we had a few species of birds, mostly wading birds. That's grown to over 44 species of birds, including a lot of shorebirds, so that's a 76% increase. We've now developed a new habitat for horseshoe crabs where we didn't have one before, and lots more fish than we had before. A lot of the fishermen are telling us that it's great for snook and bluefish and flounder and everything else. Again, it's because of the mangroves and the cordgrass and the improved water quality. And last but not least, the manatee foraging area. They create their own little channels through there, and there's not a lot of seagrass in the Central Lagoon, so they go with the cordgrass where they can. So in conclusion, we can say capping is a viable alternative for capturing muck and creating intertidal habitat. Dredging can be done, but it's going to be a lot more expensive, and in the end result, you're not going to get the habitat that we were able to create with this project. But there are considerations during the design. You have to account for compression. We did have actually not much compression, about an inch over a long term, but that has to be considered considered when you're deciding what plants to put in. The sand shooter definitely, as I said earlier, produced a more effective method, or was a more effective method, and resulted in cost savings from the traditional methods. So, any questions?